An empire bigger than Europe vanished from every map between 1850 and 1900. No war, no collapse, just a really aggressive game of cartographic whack-a-mole that Encyclopedia Britannica documented before someone hit delete. 1771. Encyclopedia Britannica, Volume 3, page 887. The entry for Tartary quotes a vast country in the northern parts of Asia, bounded by Siberia on the north and west end. They called it Grande Tartarie, a country, with geography, with borders. This was the most authoritative reference text in the English-speaking world. So, if Tartaria was prominent enough to warrant a full entry, why have you never heard of it? Apparently, Encyclopedia Britannica was just making things up between Tanzania and Tarantula. Very rigorous. In 1570, cartographer Abraham Ortelius published the first modern atlas. One of the maps inside was labeled Tartaria, or the Empire of the Great Khan. The map shows a massive territory, distinct from Russia and China. It was drawn with the same authority as France, Spain, or England. By 1850, the name Tartari begins disappearing from maps. By 1900, it is gone entirely, replaced with Mongolia, Central Asia, absorbed without explanation. Which is remarkable coordination for an era when international communication required ships and carrier pigeons. Everyone must have gotten the same memo, delivered by very efficient birds. 1850s. Photographs begin circulating of major cities. St. Petersburg, San Francisco, Washington, D.C. The images show something bizarre. Massive neoclassical structures, stone facades, ornate columns, intricate carvings. But the streets? Empty, completely deserted. Which raises one small question. Who built these buildings? And where did everyone go? Did they finish construction and immediately evacuate to celebrate? Very considerate of them to leave before the photographer arrived. The architectural style is consistent. Beaux-Arts, neoclassical, Greco-Roman revivals, massive stone blocks, hand-carved details. And yet, in these same photographs, you see primitive horse-drawn carriages, dirt roads, no cranes, no industrial machinery. These photographs show people using technology from the 1700s to navigate cities that look like they required technology from the 21st century to construct. The math does not work. The timeline does not work. But sure, let's just assume everyone was really good at arts and crafts. 1908, the Singer Building is completed in New York City, 612 feet tall, 47 stories, the tallest building in the world. 60 years later, it was demolished. The official reason, quote, economically obsolete, end quote. Which is fascinating, considering we preserve buildings half its age for far less impressive reasons. But I guess historical significance loses to, we'd rather have a parking lot. 1963. Pennsylvania Station is demolished. A massive stone structure modeled after the Baths of Caracalla. Vaulted ceilings, marble columns, one of the most beautiful transit hubs ever constructed. They tore it down and replaced it with the current Penn Station, which looks like a fluorescent lit basement. Nothing says urban progress, quite like replacing architectural grandeur with the aesthetic of a DMV waiting room. Cities across the world feature 19th century masonry buildings with a very strange design flaw. The ground floors are buried, 3 to 10 feet below street level, windows bisected by sidewalks, doors opening directly into soil. Architects apparently decided that windows facing directly into 6 feet of dirt were a bold design choice. Very avant-garde. Really captures the basement aesthetic. The official explanation is that these buildings were always built this way. But when you excavate these buildings, you find full stories underground, complete with doorways, arches, decorative stonework, not basements. Ground floors, designed to be above the surface, which means either every architect in the 1800s forgot how to design a building, or they were all extremely passionate about subterranean living. The Mole People's aesthetic was very good in that season. Now, here is where it gets interesting. The Earth's atmosphere maintains a vertical potential gradient. In fair weather conditions, the voltage difference between the ground and the upper atmosphere is approximately 100 to 150 volts per meter. This is atmospheric physics, measurable, reproducible, and in the early 1900s, people were trying to use it, because apparently someone looked at the sky and thought, you know what that needs? A power cord. 1913. Roy J. Myers files a patent for an apparatus to convert atmospheric electric energy. 1925. Herman Plausen is granted U.S. patent 1,540 Pushitas, 1998 for the same purpose. These were engineers submitting detailed technical schematics to the patent office, and the patents were approved, which means the government acknowledged that atmospheric electricity was functional. Decades later, officials would claim this technology never worked. Must have been filed in the same drawer as things we'd rather you didn't know about. 1873. The Cincinnati Observatory records indicate that aerial wires were connected to scientific instruments. The instruments functioned without any external power source. They ran on atmospheric electricity. So if we could power devices with atmospheric electricity in 1873, why are we still burning fossil fuels today? Oh, right, because free energy doesn't have quarterly earnings reports. 1893. The World's Columbian Exposition opens in Chicago. 200 massive neoclassical buildings, 690 acres. Constructed in less than 2 years. Marble facades, gilded domes, classical statues. It was called the White City, and it looked like ancient Rome resurrected in the Midwest. The timeline? Impossible. Unless everyone worked triple shifts and the architectural plans were delivered by divine intervention. But that is not even the strangest part. The official story claims these buildings were made of, quote, staff, end quote, a temporary mixture of plaster, cement, and jute fiber, designed to last 6 months. Except 2 of them are still standing today. The Palace of Fine Arts in Chicago and San Francisco. Both remain intact over a century later, which is impressive for a material supposedly designed to decompose in 6 months like a very large croissant. Someone should patent that plaster. Apparently it's immortal. May 1st, 1893. President Grover Cleveland pressed a telegraph key. Instantly, 100,000 incandescent lamps illuminated the White City. Most American cities did not have citywide electric grids yet, but the Chicago World's Fair had one, powered by massive dynamos that burned 2,000 tons of coal per day. Yet panoramic photographs show exactly 0 smokestacks. So either they invented invisible smoke, or someone is not telling the truth. My money's on the invisible smoke, very advanced for 1893. Theorists began examining older structures, cathedrals, starforts, pre-1900 towers, metal rods positioned at the highest points, connected to copper grids running through the basements. The official explanation? Lightning rods. But many of these rods were documented as being connected to instruments, not to the ground, to devices, which is a very elaborate lightning rod, almost like it wasn't a lightning rod at all. If you want to see more cases where the official story collapses, hit subscribe. 2017, researchers at MIT propose using fire bricks for thermal energy storage. 2020, Washington University confirms that red bricks containing iron oxide can function as supercapacitors. Apparently, 19th century plaster was built better than 21st century concrete. We went from build it forever to build it until the warranty expires. The White City was impossible, and yet there it was. Photographs, eyewitness accounts, millions visited, and then 6 months later, it was gone. Demolished. Burned. The cost? Millions of dollars in 1890s currency. But if these buildings were temporary, why did it cost millions to tear them down? That's like spending $1,000 to throw away a cardboard box. Theorists began compiling evidence of something they call the mud flood, a cataclysmic event allegedly occurring around 1850 that deposited massive sediment layers burying first floors of buildings. And while that sounds absurd, the physical evidence is harder to dismiss. Because apparently mud decided to simultaneously attack every major city on Earth. Coordinated mud, the worst kind. Moscow. The Polytechnic Museum undergoes renovations. Workers excavate and discover buried stories. Not basements. Full floors with windows. Fenestration designed to face open air. But instead, they face solid earth. Excavations in Prague, Paris, Rome, and St. Petersburg reveal the same phenomenon, which is either the worst architectural trend in human history or something buried them. Unless windows into dirt was the Victorian equivalent of shiplap. Seattle, 1897 to 1930. The city undertakes the Seattle regrading. Official records state the city raised street levels by up to 22 feet to fix drainage problems. That is not fixing drainage. That is burying an entire city. Hey Bob, the gutters are clogged. Better bury everything under 2 stories of dirt. Perfect solution. The original ground floors became the Seattle Underground, a network of subterranean sidewalks that still exist. Tours, run daily. Except other cities have the same buried ground floors, and they were never officially raised, which suggests either Seattle started a trend or everyone else just forgot to file the paperwork. Chicago, 1850s. Entire city blocks of masonry buildings were lifted 4 to 14 feet using jack screws. The official reason? To install sewer systems. Yet theorists claim these were not elevations, they were excavations. The buildings were already buried and the jack screws uncovered them, which is an impressively complicated way to say, we dug stuff up. And that brings us to the orphan trains, where the story stops being about buildings and starts being about people. 1854 to 1929. Over 200,000 children were transported via rail from eastern cities to the rural Midwest. The official story? Orphans being sent west for better opportunities. Farm families would take them in, except records show many of these children had living parents, and the trains ran for 75 years, continuously. Which raises one question. Where did 200,000 orphans come from? Did everyone on the East Coast simultaneously forget how to parent? Bulk discount? Theorists interpret the orphan trains as a repopulation effort. A reset event occurred around 1850, something that depopulated the adult population but left infrastructure intact. The children were redistributed to fill empty cities. The orphan trains began in 1854, just 4 years after Tartary began disappearing from maps, just as the buried window phenomenon was becoming widespread. Coincidence? Probably. But it's a very well-timed coincidence. Comment which demolished building in your city makes absolutely no sense. I'll wait while you Google, why did they tear down that building? 1904, the St. Louis World's Fair. Among the exhibits was a display of live premature infants in incubators. The infants were real. The incubators were functional. Thousands paid admission to watch doctors care for premature babies. Because nothing says legitimate medical science like displaying premature infants at a carnival next to the Ferris wheel. Very ethical. Star forts. Hundreds exist globally. Nardin, Fort McHenry, Bourtange, Palmanova. All designed with geometric precision, star-shaped layouts with symmetrical bastions. The official explanation? Defense. The angles provided overlapping fields of fire. Except the math does not support that. The angles are wrong for defensive architecture. Too precise. Too symmetrical. Far too consistent across continents that allegedly had no contact. Almost like someone designed them for aesthetics and military historians reverse-engineered a tactical justification. Cymatics, the study of visible sound. When you play a specific frequency through sand or water, the vibrations create geometric patterns. And the patterns formed by certain frequencies? They match the layouts of star forts. Perfectly, theorists claim these structures were resonance devices, part of a global energy grid. And if that sounds insane, remember we already confirmed atmospheric electricity is real. The patents exist. Reality's weird like that. 1600. Maps depict a landmass at the North Pole, a continent called Hyperborea. Early explorers included it on navigation charts. Then, sometime in the 1700s, it vanished from maps, not explored and found absent, just removed. Because apparently cartographers in the 1600s just drew continents for fun. Let's add a landmass here. Why? Vibes. 1800s. Newspapers publish reports of giant skeletons, 7 to 8 feet tall, found in burial mounds. The Smithsonian reportedly collected many, and then they disappeared. Which sounds absurd until you realize the Smithsonian has never adequately explained what happened to those skeletons. They're probably in the same warehouse as the Ark of the Covenant. The disappearance of Grande Tartarie from Western maps coincides exactly with the rise of these architectural anomalies. By 1850, every major map publisher in Europe simultaneously stopped using the word Tartarie. All of them. At once. Which is remarkable coordination for an era before email. Apparently, every cartographer in Europe woke up one morning and collectively decided to forget an entire continent existed. Must have been something in the coffee. 1700. Jesuit missionaries operating in Asia began redefining the term Tartar. Previously, it referred to the inhabitants of Tartary. The Jesuits narrowed it. They claimed it referred specifically to the Manchu people. The geographic significance was diluted, the political identity erased. Because nothing says helpful missionaries like systematically erasing an entire civilization from the linguistic record. 1957. The CIA releases a document titled National Cultural Development under Tsars. Communism? One section explicitly mentions the Soviet government's order to rewrite history regarding Tartaria. The goal? Eliminate references to non-Russian domination of the region. The Soviets wanted a unified historical narrative positioning Russia as the inheritor of all Central Asian territory. Tardily complicated that story. So they erased it, not through war, through textbooks. Because the pen is mightier than the sword, especially when you control the printing press. 1970s. Russian mathematician Anatoly Fomenko publishes New Chronology. Using statistical analysis, Fomenko claims much of ancient history is fabricated. Rome, Greece, Egypt. According to Fomenko, these civilizations are chronological duplicates of a medieval Russian horde superempire. Most historians dismiss it as pseudoscience, but his conclusion aligns disturbingly well with the Tartarian narrative. That history was rewritten. And if history was rewritten once, who is to say it was not rewritten again? Because at the exact same time, something else disappeared from textbooks. 1920s. The concept of the ether is removed from physics textbooks. For centuries, scientists believed in the ether, a medium through which electromagnetic waves propagated. Then came Einstein. special relativity, the Michelson-Morley experiment. And suddenly, the ether was obsolete. But removing the ether also removed the theoretical foundation for free energy, atmospheric electricity, etheric harmonics, convenient timing, almost like someone stood to profit from making sure energy stayed expensive. Post-World War II, Operations Paperclip and Osoaviakim. The United States and Soviet Union absorbed German scientists and technology, rockets, jet engines, chemical weapons. But theorists claim they also suppressed old-world science, atmospheric energy research, etheric harmonics. The knowledge existed, and then it vanished, not destroyed, hidden, filed under things that would make oil companies very sad. 1950s to 1970s. Urban renewal. A systematic demolition of Beaux-Arts and Gilded Age structures across the United States and Europe. Justified as modernization. Thousands of buildings destroyed, replaced with concrete boxes. The Singer Building, Penn Station, countless others. And while some demolitions were economically justified, many were not. Structurally sound, historically significant, architecturally irreplaceable, demolished anyway. Present day. The Russian Geographical Society officially debunks Tartaria as extremist fantasy, but in the same statement they acknowledge that Tartaria was a historical term used on maps. They deny it existed as a political entity, which is a fascinating hair to split. Like saying the Holy Roman Empire was just a map label, not an actual empire. Social media platforms, TikTok, YouTube. Content tagged with Tartaria is algorithmically flagged. Not removed, just limited. Labeled as misinformation. The reach is throttled, which is a fascinating middle ground between censorship and plausible deniability. We're not censoring you, we're just making sure no one sees your content. Totally different. Portraits. Tamerlane, Genghis Khan. Depictions from the 16 and 1700s show them as Caucasian. European features. Pale skin, brown or red hair. Later portraits depict them as Asian. Mongolian features. Dark hair. And no historian has adequately explained why the depictions changed. Maybe it was the lighting, or maybe someone repainted history. Literally. So is Tartaria real? Or is it just a map label that spiraled into mass delusion? Right now, hashtag Tartaria has over 300 million views on TikTok. Hashtag Mudflood has 150 million. The content is compelling. Also completely unverified. But compelling, like a true crime documentary but for architecture. But popularity does not equal truth. Scholars argue that Tartary was never a unified empire. It was a blanket term for Central Asia, a catch-all label for regions Europeans did not fully understand. Like calling everything south of Texas, Mexico. The term had no political significance, and as European knowledge improved, the term became obsolete, replaced with more accurate labels. This explanation is tidy, logical, historically defensible, except Encyclopedia Britannica gave it borders, and population estimates, and capital cities, which is oddly specific for a term that supposedly meant nothing. The mud flood theory claims a cataclysmic event buried cities worldwide, but we have documented explanations for many of these. Seattle raised its streets, Chicago lifted its buildings, both projects are well recorded, contemporary accounts exist. So if those cities have explanations, why assume a global cataclysm? Occam's razor suggests localized civil engineering projects are more plausible, unless Occam's razor was also buried in the mud flood. But some of the evidence is real, verifiable. The orphan trains did happen. 200,000 children, 75 years, documented. The incubator baby exhibits happened. Star forts exist, hundreds of them, with geometric precision defying conventional military logic. Atmospheric electricity patents exist, approved by the Patent Office, and the demolition of the Singer Building and Penn Station happened, for reasons that remain economically dubious. Cultural discontent. That is the psychological driver behind Tartaria's popularity. Modern architecture is sterile. Concrete boxes, glass towers, brutalist slabs. People look at Beaux-Arts buildings and feel lost. The craftsmanship, the details, the beauty. And they ask, why do we not build like that anymore? The answer is cost, labor, time. Modern construction prioritizes efficiency over aesthetics. But that answer feels hollow. So people reach for alternatives, a longing for a lost golden age, which is more comforting than we just got cheap. But the theory has been weaponized. Russian nationalists use Tartaria to claim historical ownership of Eurasia. Western groups use it as evidence of the Great Replacement. A narrative claiming modern society is a degraded remnant, which is demonstrably false and rooted in prejudice masquerading as history. But facts rarely stop a good conspiracy theory. They're more like speed bumps. The theory absorbs other conspiracies. 5G vaccines, giants, flat Earth. It becomes a grand theory that explains everything. And when a theory explains everything, it explains nothing. It's the intellectual equivalent of a wizard did it. We possess the ability to build skyscrapers, but modern masonry cannot replicate the intricate stone detailing of 19th century cathedrals. Not at scale, not at cost. A single hand-carved gargoyle can take weeks, and yet 19th century builders produced them by the thousands, which suggests either they had infinite time and patience or labor was really, really cheap. Probably the latter. Ion Power Group. A modern company in the 2020s, they hold patents for harvesting atmospheric electricity using graphene. The physics work. The technology is functional. Small-scale prototypes exist. It validates the core claim that atmospheric electricity is real and harvestable, but it does not validate the history. Just because the physics work today does not mean they worked in 1850. The theory thrives in an educational void. Most people do not know the Industrial Revolution's actual capabilities. Jack screws, steam-powered cranes, hydraulic lifts. 19th century engineering was more advanced than we give credit for. The Brooklyn Bridge, the Eiffel Tower, the Transcontinental Railroad. So when people say impossible with 1800s technology, they are basically admitting they slept through history class. Survivorship bias. Only the grandest stone buildings survived 19th century fires and demolitions. Wood structures burned. Brick buildings crumbled, but marble and granite endured. So when we look back, we see palaces, capitals, cathedrals, not the tenements, the shacks, which creates the illusion all buildings were palaces. Except the palaces also burned down, repeatedly. Chicago fire, San Francisco earthquake, London fire, and yet those stone buildings still standing, which suggests they were overbuilt, engineered for permanence, almost like someone knew they needed to survive something. And yet, adherents use the internet to argue modern technology is a regression. They film TikTok videos on smartphones, upload them via wireless networks, and claim the 19th century had superior technology. Nothing says rejection of modernity quite like filming a TikTok rant on your iPhone about how the 19th century had better technology. The irony is thicker than the mud in the mudflood theory. Look at any Tartaria video comment section. Half of them call it nonsense. The other half have photos of buried windows in their own cities. Maybe both are right. Maybe the windows are real, but the explanation is mundane. Maybe the theory is wrong, but the questions are valid. Or maybe the official story is incomplete. Maybe there are gaps, inconsistencies, and maybe those gaps are intentional. If this investigation disturbed your reality, share it. Let us make people uncomfortable together. Maybe Tartaria never existed. Or maybe it did, and we are living in the rubble of something we were never supposed to remember. Either way, the buildings are still buried. The map still changed, and no one will tell you why. Encyclopedia Britannica listed it as a country. The CIA documented Soviet efforts to erase it. Photographs show empty streets and impossible architecture. Patents prove atmospheric electricity was functional. 200,000 children were shipped west. Star forts with cymatic precision cover the globe. And every explanation raises more questions. So what is the truth? I do not know. And neither do the people telling you they do. What I know is this. Someone spent a lot of effort making sure you forgot. Maps were rewritten, textbooks were edited, buildings were demolished, terms were redefined, and when people started asking questions, the algorithm made sure those questions stayed buried. Not censored, just invisible. Which is worse. Because it means the answers are out there, somewhere, waiting, and someone really does not want you to find them.